it feels as if he's pulling on a wall. And so there's really no communication, there's not the true communication there either. So ways in which we might put in safety mechanisms actually interfere with our ability to touch into the true intelligence of the system as a whole. So thank you. That exercise is really kind of key to understanding. So it's, as a metaphor in the physical world, it actually can tell us a little bit about what's going on in Riley's world, right? This is kind of what's going on when Joy says, hey, I'm driving. Joy, or sadness, step aside. Here, I'm going to draw a circle here, and I want you to stay inside that box. But sadness can't resist. She's compelled to continue to touch the things. And that dissonance that occurs in that moment as they're trying to both simultaneously drive at the same time is actually powerful information about something that that's trying to be perceived that doesn't fit within the model of the way things should be going forward. And it's that key which is actually a powerful way that we might be able to wake ourselves up. If you're familiar with the idea of lucid dreaming, there are ways that you can train yourself. The idea of lucid dreaming is that you become awake and conscious in your dreams. And you could fly or have sex or do all sorts of... You can't change light levels. There are a couple of things you can't do. But there are a lot of things that you can do, and it's an interesting way to explore the psyche. And one of the ways that you can use that information is you can look at your hands during the day and say, am I dreaming? Look at clocks and text, try to read things, try to adjust light levels by flipping light switches. Do that, train yourself during the day to do that, and then at night, tell yourself you're going to do the same exercises in your sleep. And if you remember to do that, hey, I wonder if I'm dreaming, try the light switch. It didn't work. I think I'm dreaming. And now you've opened a portal to that. What I notice is that when I have a value differentiator, like I mentioned with the two people trying to train in the class, or if I'm working with my spouse or my kids and I feel like we're butting heads with each other, there's a righteous indignation that comes up in me. There's something that feels fiercely right about something, and like, you're wrong. And I notice that's the trigger. Oh my God, here's this thing. There's something happening right here that I'm missing something. There's a piece here that I'm not listening to. That fierce indignation is almost protecting the part of me that feels most vulnerable. And it's actually a key for me to see, can I tell what it actually is? Can I actually become objective and notice the subjective experience is coming from a specific belief system, something deep in me in the way that I hold the world to be. In that moment, I can actually piece into and actually feel a little bit of something that I can relax a bit. Like in the exercise doing here, I can't listen, and then all of a sudden I find the thing, and I follow that intuition, and I find the balance point. And now I'm actually experiencing something from a different perspective. The blind man and the elephant is similar to that. And politically, as we look around the world these days, and you can see it's really gotten to this fierce, tense moment where people are looking at Facebook and they have a whole different worldview. People that you used to be able to have conversations with, you can no longer have conversations with, because if you have a difference of opinion about Trump, you're going to go to war, right? And it's like arguing. In the part about it that's fascinating is that as you're talking to them, it's almost as if they're experiencing a completely different world. Like the basis for which they make sense of the world seems to be a different basis than the one we are. Similar to the disagreement between the blind man and the elephant. That, hey, no, this is a wall, no, this is a tail. Whereas the woman up in the top says, you fools, you're all touching the same reality. Well, so what's happening there? What's happening that we're touching the same reality, but we're not perceiving the same reality? Well, it's a partial view of reality. But the thing that's interesting, right, this is why I say I'm not so much giving you information, I'm not telling you how to look at the world. What I'm saying is there's something in you that actually needs to develop, just like a child develops the perspective in order to make sense of the world in a particular way. We have to do that. And then once sufficiently individuated, we actually come back and tie it into the collective. And now we test that against what other people know. And in testing it, we find there are differences. And in those differences, there's a little bit of a tension. And the tension often comes as, I want you to change your opinion. I've worked hard to build my mental model of the world. This is the way that I understand things, and I want to preserve this. I've spent a lot of time and it's important to me. And what's happening in that moment is maybe there's something that I have my belief about the world that's actually blinding me to something that's larger about the world that I want to perceive. And in that moment of actually opening myself up to that, I can see that there's something else that happens. And like with Riley, when that happens, the memories, the key memories, the islands of experience fall apart. They actually collapse. And it's as if, like a snakeskin, it outgrows it. It was supportive up to a certain point. Once it can no longer grow, it's now restricted. It has to fall away to make way for a new growth. It's an incredibly vulnerable thing to have happen, but if I can trust myself that I'm okay, let me see if I can find a way to let go of my mental models enough to find what else is beyond this. Then I can find a common center of gravity where we're actually both able to perceive something that neither one of us was able to perceive alone. How much time? Okay. Okay. So I've modified this a little bit. The blind men I've labeled. The labels I've given them are authority, trust, responsibility, accountability, and integrity. And I noticed something interesting about these words. You all know about the one with responsibility. Responsibility from one perspective is I'm responsible. If something goes wrong, it's my fault. I'm to blame for the problem, right? Or I feel the burden of actually maintaining the situation. And then the flip side of that, the ability to respond. Responsibility, the ability to respond, being responsive to a situation. And I noticed for myself that shift actually had a huge difference. When I think I'm responsible for the success of this talk, then I feel like, oh my God, I got to study, I got to know, I have all this stuff, and better not make a mistake. But if I notice, I'm responsive to the quality of this talk, then I actually am able to look around and say, do people look like they're staying in touch with what I'm saying? Am I going too fast? Is my mouth too dry? But I can actually respond to the circumstances of it rather than say, how did I do at the end, and let me judge my past based on some criteria. I'm actually in the moment being able to look at that. Accountability is interesting, and if I do the same mental trick on accountability that I did with responsibility, the ability to account, what I'm really saying is I'm keeping track, right? I'm not saying, let's find the one throat to choke, you're going to be the one for the whole thing, but I'm really saying, no, we're just keeping track of, hey, somebody said they're going to bring that, did they bring it? Yeah, they did. Okay, let's mark that down. Now I'm actually marking the things so that if we say something went wrong, what went wrong? Well, let's look what happened. We said we're going to do these things, and we accounted for these things, and this was the result. And did we miss something, right? So I've given myself the ability to account for the circumstances that happened in between. It's a very different view. The view is kind of, that individuated view is it's all my fault. This is kind of where authority comes from. It's my fault because some external force said what should have happened and I didn't follow that. The external authority said I'm wrong and I feel wrong. I feel responsible, I feel accountable, I feel, the ugliness of that. If I say, wait a minute, authority is actually internal as well. This doesn't happen without our agreement. I'm participating in this agreement. Authority arises in the we space, as well as coming from outside. It comes from in here, and I can feel it. Just as we were leaning back, I could feel what was happening there, right? It's like I can actually test into what's happening. With trust, what's really actually, that's the piece that I'm looking at the most. Listening to the body, listening to my mind and my emotions, listening to what's happening out here, and noticing as it's flowing, does something feel out of alignment? Does something need adjustment? And the last one is integrity. And this one's kind of a fascinating one to me. When I think about integrity, I think about, are you trustworthy? Are you the kind of person that I would want to work with? And it's again kind of from that external authority perspective. It's like it's a yes or a no. You are in integrity or not, and if you're not, well, hit the door. But instead, if I think of it like, okay, there's a bridge across a cavern, and I want to walk across it. Does the bridge have the structural integrity to support my weight? And I look at it, it's made out of toothpicks. I don't think I trust it, right? It doesn't look very strong. Well, it may not look very strong, but the answer isn't, as we often do, to make you think my integrity is higher than it is. Let me put some wallpaper on it and make it look like a steel beam trellis bridge. Now it looks strong. That doesn't really solve the problem. It's not going to support my weight going across. I really want to know what the vulnerabilities of that structure are to know if it will support my weight as I'm going across. In the same way that we were doing this with each other, I want to know is my feet solid? Am I going to fall and hurt myself? I want to know where the breaks in integrity are so that I can address those and actually respond to that rather than just pretend that it's okay and discover in the heat of the moment that something needs to happen different. So that, in that way, something really fascinating happens when I'm noticing my behavior in the world, when I'm working on a team or when I'm trying to get something challenging to do, challenging work out. Which is, in that if I'm an individual moving, I'm not balancing with anything else. And from that individual's perspective, the authority and all that being external, I have a way that I interact with the world. And this way that I'm internalizing it, internalizing authority and internalizing the trust, I'm actually going inward and feeling something much deeper. And in that moment when Riley actually trusts her emotions, that she finds that way for her emotions to trust each other and work together, there's a shift that happens that actually has something happen like the blind man and the elephant. If I imagine the elephant on my palm, the blind men are each of my fingers, and they're disagreeing about what they're seeing, but sure that they're right, there's a dissonance that happens. But if I remember, you know what, we're actually connected. These are actually connected through my palm, and I'm actually sensing the same thing. This is just one reality. How do these different perspectives on this one reality come together to give me a one cohesive view of what the world looks like? And from that moment, and almost like in a flash of insight, similar to what happened for Helen Keller, it's like, oh my God, I'm actually seeing something now from another perspective. I'm seeing something from a higher perspective that allows a new way to organize these disparate pieces of information into a cohesive whole. I actually go from seeing a two-dimensional world with each of my eyes to a three-dimensional world where that dissonance between them allows me to see something wider. Now, see a couple of eyes closing and nodding, and I want to say this is interesting because I'm actually charging you up with some really interesting metaphors, and it can be actually a little bit, not to mention the little drowsiness in the afternoon, but you actually can become a little charged up with these things. There's a lot of, in some ways, information, but in some ways it's different from information in a normal sense. I'm gonna close it off with one more thing. So one part is I'm stressing you a little bit with information overload. It's intentional, in the same way that Anne was stressing Helen Keller, giving her almost too much information for the existing model of the world, the way she's making sense to make sense. I'm gonna push you a little bit beyond that. So you've probably all seen this, the data, information, knowledge, wisdom pyramid. So something interesting about this is going back to trusting wisdom, back from the beginning. So data is just noise. Data is just the background, all this stuff. When we make sense of it, when we separate out signal from noise, we now have information. We have metadata, one level up from data that actually allows us to distinguish some data from other data, and we actually now make sense of it. In a similar way, knowledge is meta-information. Knowledge are the maps that we have of our mental models of the way that we understand the paradigms in which we understand the information flows. And it's the level in which we operate. And in the worldview that we have, that we make sense of the world about the way that things should be, when you have a feeling, that's wrong, that person didn't use their signal in driving, we have a model of the way the world should be, and when it doesn't correspond to what we witness or experience, we actually get a little bit upset about it. In the same way, what we're starting to see now is wisdom is meta-knowledge. It's actually the place, like the blind man and the elephant, where these various distinct worldviews and perspectives come together in a non-dual whole. And from that perspective, I actually can see the world in a different way. I have another way of viewing the world than I did before. And the key, remember, that I gave you about how to wake up from the dream, the Maya, the illusion that we're living, that I'm in my own world, is to notice the points in which you're absolutely sure you're right, but it somehow feels like the universe isn't agreeing with you. First time that I caught myself doing that, thinking the world's not right, I'm right, and the world's wrong, I thought, that's a profoundly arrogant view. Like, how did I ever come to think that was even possible? And from there, I learned a little bit of humility to actually lean into